Welcome to Freedom Window. Today I'm going to talk about Pennsylvania, but before I do, I want to encourage you to like this video if you enjoy it. If you're tired of the way the press deals with polling, how they report certain polls and not others, how they cherry pick, and frankly just give a dishonest picture as it relates to polling, subscribe to this channel. I look at every poll that goes into my average. I look at the internals. I determine whether or not they make sense, and then I apply them to my averages. So please consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's look at Pennsylvania. Okay, the Target Smart data, which is what everyone's talking about in the media because it's just what is the most visible, you still see 69% of the returned ballots are Democrat ballots and 21% are Republican ballots. In Pennsylvania, only 10% independents. Now, this, to the layman's eye, looks like the Democrats are running away with it. Of course, we know that is not the case. First, let's look at the polling in Pennsylvania. What does it say? Average of pollsters of late shows Biden up 5. My average shows him up 0.7 of a percentage point. Recent polls of note, an Insider Advantage poll just came out not too long ago showing Trump up 3. Other polls, University of Wisconsin YouGov, Gravis Marketing, they show Biden up substantially. Muhlenberg, they show Biden up substantially. Fox News shows him up 5. Suffolk 7. CNN 10. Quinnipiac 8. Rasmussen shows it at 3. And then Trafalgar Group has it at 0.9, or let's see, about a point. Bottom line, the polling is universally showing Biden ahead with the exception of one poll. Clearly, however, looking at the early returns, there is a problem with the polling. And now we're going to talk about that. So here we have an average of all of the polling expectations when it comes to who is going to vote early and how they're going to vote in Pennsylvania. This is review for those of you who've seen other videos. Bottom line, Democrats 52% expected to vote early and Republicans 21%. I apply those to a model. Now the reason the polls are important is it determines how many votes we should expect to see at this point. If you just look at the raw totals, it does look impressive for Democrats. But it's a very lopsided number because if you just look at the election day totals, that would also look very lopsided in the other direction for Republicans. So you have to consider both. And the media pushes that narrative because, frankly, they want to push the idea that Biden's winning. And to the layperson, that's what it looks like. And that's what they want. They want to create the perception that Biden is inevitable. So when we apply those poll numbers to this model, and then we compare the poll numbers to the number of ballots requested, we can see that the Democrats are actually underperforming their polls because they're only getting a 0.89 early request ballot ratio. They would have a 1 if they were meeting their poll expectation of 52%. Republicans are actually exceeding their expectations. They have a 1.07. In the end, you need to have about a 1.2 to 1.25 early ballot ratio to actually meet your poll expectation. So let's take a look. Here is the fly in the ointment in Pennsylvania. Democrats got out to a very early start and returned a ton of ballots right away. So as you can see here in the percentages, almost 70% of Democrats have returned their early ballot who have requested them. Republicans and independents are trending right at an even pace, about 54-55%. My assumption is, and this is because there was less emphasis on early balloting for Republicans, they're taking their time, a little more relaxed about it. The Democrats, this is their whole strategy. So they got to the game early and they got there big time. I think this number is going to get even as we approach the end of the early balloting period. I expect the Democrats will end up around 76 to 77%, and the Republicans also around 76 to 77%. Independents will probably be more down around the 65% number of returned ballots. We'll just have to wait and see. I have constructed a third model that tries to make better sense of these early balloting numbers, and it's now my favorite model. Before I show you my favorite model, I'm going to show you the other models that we've been talking about. This is the model that was previously my favorite model, and it shows the Republicans outnumbering Democrats almost 5-4 on election. I'm sorry, once all is said and done. That is a little too rosy of a scenario for Republicans. That's not going to happen. The Democrats are getting out at a huge rate in their early vote. The second model I showed you was the one that's more favorable toward Democrats. This is also not going to happen. In this one, we're just looking at the actual early vote plus the estimated election day without the early vote multiplier. So in other words, we're not taking into account the number of requested ballots at all as an indication of likely interest in the election. This is just looking at the early vote plus the estimated election day vote without applying the energy level of the parties to our estimate. This would lead to a likely Democratic victory, although if Democrats outnumber Republicans by 4% in the state of Pennsylvania, that's not a guaranteed victory. Let's take a look at the polling on that for just a moment. Okay, in that scenario, if the Democrats were to outnumber Republicans by 4%, you'd have to look at two things. What is the ratio of Democrats vote? Are a big chunk of them voting for Trump? And a lot of people believe that in Pennsylvania, they will be. The question is how many Republicans are voting for Biden? Because that's where the suburban women come into play. Trump is losing some of his vote there. So you have to see who's losing more of their vote to the other party. And then you also have to look at the independent column. We take a look at the most recent Muhlenberg College poll. This would suggest that Biden would win if the Democrats were outnumbering Republicans by 4%, because Biden's not losing as much as Trump is, and Biden's getting more of his own party, 90-7 versus 88-8, and independents favor him by 3 points. The Fox News poll would also suggest that this is the case. They're performing evenly in the Fox News poll, 89-8 versus 89-9, where the independents are splitting. In that case, the advantage in turnout would go to Biden, and he would win. On the other hand, the Insider Advantage poll found a very different scenario. It found that Republicans were staying home better than Democrats, 87-11, and Joe Biden was only getting 80% of his own party, and 16% of his party was abandoning him to go vote for Trump. That's what he was finding. Now, he did find a big split among independents, but this is a very small independent sample, 8%. So, if the Democrats are ahead, they are likely going to win in terms of overall turnout. That means if this model is correct, the Democrats are the likely victors. But it's not absolute for sure. If this model is correct, which I don't think it is, because the problem with this model is, which I discovered is, it's underestimating the Democrats' early turnout. They're really getting out ahead of expectations. So I developed a third model. So here we see, this is the first model. This is the second model. And now I've added a third model. What did I do differently? Here is my new favorite model. It does show Republicans slightly outnumbering Democrats by 2.3% at this point. What is the difference? What assumptions have I changed? Well, instead of using an estimated early turnout based on the request ballot ratio, I instead just looked at the likely turnout based on just straight percentages. Now, the last election, Democrats only managed to get out 61% of their vote. This time, I'm giving them a huge bump all the way up to 76% in their turnout in the early vote. If they get 76% of their vote out and the Republicans get 77%, now you say, why are you giving the Republicans the advantage? Well, they had a big advantage last time. The Republicans had almost 10% more turnout in 2016. They're likely going to exceed them again in terms of a percentage of turnout. So 77% Republican and then 65% independent, which is very high for them because they were 55% last time. If that is the early turnout, and then we look at the estimated election day total, using my early ballot ratio as an indicator of election energy or interest in each party, which makes sense, the Republicans should still outnumber Democrats. Now, if Republicans outnumber Democrats, it's over in Pennsylvania. In the best case scenario for the Republicans, they would far outnumber Democrats. I've eliminated that as a possibility based on the early Democratic vote. In the worst case scenario for Republicans right now, they're trailing in terms of overall turnout to the Democrats by 4% once all is said and done. That doesn't rule them out in terms of whether they can win or not, but they're much less likely to win than they are to lose. And then finally, my favorite model, this is the one that I think is most likely to happen as of right now. Republicans outnumber Democrats by 2.3%. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share the video. YouTube doesn't necessarily promote content that it doesn't agree with. So share this video, email, text, however you can, and subscribe to the channel if you're tired of the way the media is constantly throwing these biased polls in your face. If you want to know what's actually going on, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to look at good polling information. That's what I offer. I offer a perspective on the polls that makes sense. Please subscribe to this channel.